people. I say this all the time. And sometimes I feel that you have to kind of remember who we are and why we are. And that is, within itself, is about remembering our strengths, remembering our ancestors, remembering that we must never forget our stories, remembering that we need to teach these stories to our youth because we are forgetting our history. And it's imperative that we not. The Jewish community says that to forget, to not talk about it, means that it will repeat itself. And if you can see what's going on in our community today, you can see that we are in trouble. One of the things that our mayor had talked about, I saw on Facebook, he said, well, let's talk about the wonderful things that are here in Vallejo. Well, we know what the wonderful things are. We have a rich culture of diversity. We have a beautiful, wonderful waterfront. We have a ferry that comes from here and goes to San Francisco and other places. But what we don't have is the unity that we need here in order for us to move forward. We need you as people, as our people, to start moving forward, to start talking to your youth, to start going to the school boards, to start going to city council. You have a couple of two people that's sitting right here in the front, Michelle Denise Adolph with the blue hair, and this other sister that's sitting right here with the red top on, my Miss Kennedy, who I love dearly, and her husband. These people get up and speak. People may not like what they have to say, but they say it with intent because they care about this community. And if all we're going to do is just talk about it, then what is the purpose? Our ancestors went through a lot. Do you not realize that in our school system today, and which has been going on for years, that our students, are not being taught cursive? So do you remember what it took for us to be able to do that? How many people were murdered so that we could read and write? And now our teachers, the reasons that did not happen was because the teachers said that they were too busy. Our last superintendent, Adams, we got into it because he's standing there talking to people in a meeting, and he's talking about how his parents were educators and administrators. All of you, I'm pointing at myself. When do we do something about that? We're working on bringing in a vocational school of the arts, like the Oprah School of the Arts. We went down there, took the mayor, need to take a couple of months off because I'm tired. But we're getting right back into the swing of things. But just to be able to get that accomplished in this school district, because you know we need help, it's like knocking your head up against a wall. This time, I'm not here to tell you what you need to do, but I'm telling you that you need to think in terms of your conscience. My purpose of bringing these pieces here today was so that we could learn about, especially here in California, the connection that we have with Native Americans, right? In California, they say that there was no slavery. So when I put the poster up on Solano Community Awareness, I got this chatter and this feedback, upset. Well, why do we need to give you reparations? Why do we need to do this? Don't you know that there was no slavery? Don't you know that my people were not indentured slaves? And so the only response I put was, oh my. So then that wasn't enough for him, so I looked back and he came back again and he said, I am waiting. I did not respond because as far as I was concerned, he needed to hold his breath to wait for me to respond to him. In a command, I am waiting. So my thing is, do your research. Do your research so that you'll find out who we are. We got here, even though this was a slave-free state, they snuck us in. So that we didn't have cotton that I'm aware of. But they put us on the railroads. They put us, in the ranches, and they had us doing all type of different things. And they put us in other places as well. I want you to understand who we are. I want you to understand our strengths. I want you to talk to our youth. Because without talking to our youth, then this next generation is in trouble. We need to tell our youth, those that are doing drugs, Okay, see, these kids are entrepreneurs. I was telling a friend that the other day. These are entrepreneurs. Think about it. They have to have the financial skill set. They have to have that money. They have to have staff. They need to be able to count that money. They have to have a goal. And they have all of that, checks and balances. But what we need to do is try to figure out a way to turn that all around for them so that we can make a difference. We need to understand when they talk about Uncle Tom, here's my statement to that. We had a city council member that would call us Uncle Toms and all kinds of things on the dais. But I got tired of that. So you can call me one, and here's why. Because our Uncle Tom, he wasn't what was depicted in the book. He was an abolitionist. He dealt with the slave master because he was able to get things from them that the one that was beating them could not. Okay? And so he promised him that if he did everything and got monies together, he would free him. Well, of course, that was a lie. So when we went to ask him, he said, oh, no, I'm not going to do it. So he said, okay. So he took his family and they went to Canada. He developed a sawmill business. He came back and he got more people. And he taught them the business, taught them about contracts, and he taught them how to be in the world. And he kept going back. You need to understand that the words that are placed out there are meant to demoralize us. But let's stop demoralizing ourselves. We need to love ourselves, hold our heads up high, and continue to work. I want to thank all of you. A lot of times when I do things like Kwanzaa, it's specific. Black history is more than just specific. It's about inclusivity, even though Kwanzaa is also. But it's because of all of the cultures. Some that died for us, some that walked for us. It's because of all of them, I asked different types of participation in this event. So I'm going to thank you. I know I have more to say. I'm nervous, I'm forgetting, and I want to get these gentlemen in. But I want to thank you for coming, just to listen, just to hear. And I asked also Dr. Kirby and Josiah and his crew to come and talk about reparations so that people can understand. You don't have to agree. That's okay. But learning about it, they say knowledge is power, but implementation of knowledge is even better. And take that with you. We have to fight for us. We have to fight for the city. We have to fight for our youth. We can no longer sit back and be quiet. They're selling properties up underneath of us like it's crazy. $300 million for Mare Island. I mean, I apologize, $3 million for 300 acres for Mare Island is an insanity, especially in the market. We as a community need to demand that we, the taxpayers, receive what is needed for all of us, for our youth and our babies. So with that, I want to introduce Mr. Ivy and his team from the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers of Northern California. You want to come on up, please?
Good evening. So my name is Daniel Hardman, Trooper Hardman, with the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers of Northern California. We are stationed out. For some reason, I'm a veteran, so I always say stuff like that. But we are assigned and we come out of the Sacramento area. But we do travel around the state of California. We will go to other states. We've gone to Nevada, Seattle, Washington State. So we do a little bit of traveling, around the Pacific Coast. So with me today is Trooper Ivy, Bernard Ivy. He is our Secretary and Treasurer. Trooper Oscar Russell, and Trooper John Price. I guess maybe 10 members in our unit, is that all right? Something like that. Our president is William Terrell, Trooper Terrell. He could not be here tonight, otherwise he would be giving this presentation. But he couldn't be here, so they asked me, and we all get our chance in the hot seat, so this is me. So what I want to do tonight is just share a little bit of information with you about the Buffalo Soldiers. You can see our uniforms. This is pretty much the authentic uniform. We order these, we pick these out of our own pocket. They're pretty authentic from the time period. So with that, I'll get into what I have to share with you. So the Buffalo Soldiers were first formed and organized at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, following the signing of Act of Congress by the President, September 21st, 1866. That was the legislation that created the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, the Buffalo Soldiers did not have a part in the Civil War. We came after the Civil War. From 1866 to approximately 1951 was the last time the final unit was disbanded. But as far as action and really, participating on active duty, probably somewhere around 1948, I think, or something like that. Yeah. So they started as 6 original units. Before long, they consolidated those down to 5. So they had the 9th, I could never find the name of the 6th unit, but there was the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments, the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments, and the 2nd, 38th Infantry Regiments. They were primarily composed of black and African American soldiers, and I say primarily because all the soldiers were black. However, at the time, due to the laws and regulations, the commanding officers were all white. We did a lot in the Indian Wars. The settling of the plains, the Buffalo Soldiers pretty much were, they could be found anywhere from like Oklahoma, Kansas, all the way out through the west, New Mexico, Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington State. There were settlements and stations and assignments throughout the entire western part of the U.S. as the expansion was happening. We did a lot of work with the Indian relocation and resettlement rather. So when it comes to the name Buffalo Soldier, a lot of people wonder where that name came from, and probably most of us have heard the legends and the myths surrounding that. Maybe it had something to do with the curly hair, the dark skin, the fierceness that they showed in battle. All of these things, we can't say for sure which one of those things are actually true and which one of those are not. So we just kind of accept it all as part of our legend in our history. When it came to actually what we spent a lot of our time doing, we spent a lot of our time patrolling the prairie, patrolling the frontier, escorting wagon trains out into the west and help the settlers get to where they were going. And there were quite a few notable Buffalo Soldiers, and I'll throw out some names here. Some of you may have heard of them. Charles Young, he was the 3rd African American to graduate from West Point in 1889. He rose to the rank of colonel. During the Spanish-American War, he returned to active duty. He had retired, but he returned to active duty during the Spanish-American War, and he commanded cavalry units in both Cuba and the Philippines. The Buffalo Soldiers did actually deploy to other countries, Cuba, the Philippines, the Spanish-American War. There are a lot of great stories about the heroism that the Buffalo Soldiers displayed over in the Philippines. So if you have a chance, do some reading. There's a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of information you can learn about, the work that the Buffalo Soldiers did. In 1903, he was appointed superintendent of the Sequoia and General Grant National Parks in California. So a lot of people don't know that the Buffalo Soldiers were actually some of the first park rangers for the national parks in the United States. When the national parks were organized, and they used a lot of the Buffalo Soldiers to help patrol those parks, to help keep those parks open and clean and get them established. Also in 1916, he led the 10th Cavalry as they attempted to capture Francisco Pancho Villa. Of course, I've heard of Pancho Villa through movies and folklore and stuff like that. But he was a real person, and Charles Young actually did participate in the attempt to try to capture him. Also, there were some other notable Buffalo Soldiers: John Morton Finney, Henry O. Flipper, Augustus Wally, and Kathy Williams. I'm especially proud to mention Kathy Williams because a lot of folks don't know, but there was actually a female Buffalo Soldier back in the day. She was the only one. She didn't just walk up and say, "Hey, I'd like to join the Buffalo Soldiers." She actually changed her name to William Cathay. and she hid her identity as a woman, and she did serve on active duty in different combat units and patrols and stuff like that. But due to the nature of health issues and having to go through physical examinations and things like that, a doctor eventually discovered that she was a woman. They did not force her out at that time. They allowed her to serve her term, her enlistment, but they confined her to her work to the post. So that she was no longer able to go out on active duty breaks and patrols and stuff like that. So the final Buffalo Soldier unit was decommissioned in 1951. Mark Matthews, in 2005, he passed away in 2005 at the age of 111. He was the oldest living Buffalo soldier at that time. So all of us, I say all of us, many of us in our unit and in other units, this is a national organization, have Buffalo soldiers in our own family history. My great-grandfather served in World War I, which was I think he got out in 1819. Now his father before him also served in the military, but he served in the Civil War. But our president, William Terrell, his father was a Buffalo soldier, and most of us are veterans, not all of us, but most of us are veterans. So the Buffalo soldiers have a very rich history. There were 18, I think it was 18 Medal of Honor winners, is that right? They served with pride and distinction. They served with honor. They were committed to making America better for those that would come after them. Not just their own children, but the country as a whole. So we have here on display some of the things that we brought with us. These would be like the field kits. And you can see this little pot here, this little, I guess they could cook in this or eat out of it, you know. These types of things here were like jerky, dried meats, bread. What was this called? Hardtack. Yeah. Okay. Some of the other rations they had were sugar, salt, coffee, and flour, things like that, that they would take with them. Because these gentlemen, they would be out on patrol probably by themselves, maybe a day's ride, you know, and so they had to be prepared for whatever came. They had to hunt their own meat, whether they did by, you know, shooting a deer or catching fish or whatever the case may be. They had to learn how to survive. Their survival skills had to be top-notch in order for them to do that. The Buffalo soldiers, I'm 6'2", about 190, 198 pounds or so. I would not have qualified to be a Buffalo soldier. The Buffalo soldiers were, because they traveled on their horse, they had to be about 5'5", somewhere in there, and about 150 pounds. They had to really, because it was sometimes that's all they had was just them and their horse. So that horse had to get them out and get them home. So they had their pack, they had their rations, and they had their weapons, a rifle as well as a sidearm, and that was about it. That was about it. A bedroll maybe, and so the rest of it was up to them to make it out there and make it back. So they didn't take a whole lot with them. It was a pretty rough way of life, but these men were made of great material. They did a lot. They did probably more than what was asked of them, but they were doing it for a reason.
Because we are. So I am. Because we are. Let's do it one more time. I am. Because we are. And that's what this piece is called. I'm going to read this one because I haven't memorized it. It's been a while. I understand that it was through unity of helping hands and collective prayers that still I stand despite of every wrongdoing and every naysayer. I care for one because that someone cared for me. And before that, someone cared for he and for she. And before that, our ancestors prayed that collectively we. Therefore, I am because we are. Self-determination has to be enough to keep us pushing and have us recognize we may have reached the mountaintop, but now we decide what lies on the other side. What do we want to see? It is only us that can alter this reality. There can be no you without me, so there must be collective work and responsibility. I am because we are. If I have it to give, I will do so, and you should do the same as well. No one ever knows when the person at the bottom gets to watch the person at the top tumble past them down the stairwell. There should be no greed because Jehovah is our one true provider. Let us use cooperative economics because prosperity without trust and loyalty will only serve to divide us. I am.
Because we are.
Our purpose together is far greater than mine alone, and creativity that lies within me would have remained dormant in my bones had it not been for helping hands that came to uplift me. Always remember your purpose comes not just from living life, but from the gift that lies within thee. Once you find what it is that you were meant to do, reach back and grab someone, because that once was you. I am.
Because we are.
Never forget humility. Humility is part of having faith. Faith knows that you're not the greatest thing inhabiting this space. Knowing that there is a God that is greater than us all and nothing and no one is ever too big to face a fall. There is also no one too small to win the most meager beginnings and often have the most dazzling endings. However you see it, we are all connected because there can be no one without two. And through you, and though you may not feel it, someone somewhere is affected by every single thing that you do. In this present day, we stand strong only because of the kneeling done by those who are long gone. So if I am beautiful, I owe it to the history of my genes. If I am successful, I owe it to my parents who taught me plenty of things. If I am educated, it is because of the teachers who took time to encourage me to go on. If I am confident, it is because of the church members who pushed me into God's loving arms. And if I am fearless, it is because of the men around me who told me I can achieve anything. And if I am hopeful, it is because I know the history of our brilliant and resilient kings and queens. I am just as you are, all of these things. I am.
Because we are.
And may these principles always remain. Ashe.
Ashe.
Stand with us as slaves, held down, downtrodden, and only hung from trees during Jim Crow days. See, this mass miseducation would have you to believe that our glory years only found us doing domestic work and singing mighty Negro spirituals in church, or that we were only good enough to be used for experiments or toil the land. See, some will still try to teach you that all we want as a people is to eat out of master's hand, because we love welfare, food stamps, and Section 8, and all of our communities are only filled with guns, violence, and hate. Please. For my sister, blood of my blood, who seems to find value in every culture but hers. See, I understand from where you sit, it seems like we've been dealt a bad hand, even being called black, like everything bad in this land. So it seems that we are only a people to be feared and not to be revered because we are black, like some old bad luck creepy cat. Black, like a night with no light. Black, like a market where ain't nothing going right. Black male, black sheep, black ball. We have been misled to equate everything black, including the people, with the downfall. And see, I understand some of your peers ain't showed you much better. Gang violence, looting, and riots, names we call each other in songs. I understand that we got a whole lot of heavy going on. Sometimes we weren't concerned with our egos and what we do, but my sister, don't let that discourage you. For my sister, flesh of my flesh, who said she would rather be of any other ancestry, please learn your history so that you may begin to understand that the bones of the first man was found back in our homeland. And suddenly the world's most hated seems we gave birth to nations. Before astronomy, we mapped and counted these stars, took honey from bees, took dirt from earth, studied and found its medicinal work. But see, you ain't even got to go back that far to find black excellency. Creators and innovators and everything, the heart surgeries and cell phones and cars. Now how is it that we couldn't read but still built houses, had no food and no money, but still kept mouths fed, so resilient, amounts of us murdered by the millions, tortured by the thousands, yet here we are still standing from the White House to public housing. So to all my people, by blood or by root, let nothing discourage you. Study to show yourself approved, because society will never expose your true value. You see, it's nothing until someone else does it. Don't believe me, ask how cool big hips and lips were before white women started to love you. Know the history of this here DNA, so that you can speak in pride and say, don't make me anything other than black. African, Hispanic, the Victorians, Haitians who held their own land against foreign invasions. Black, like James Brown who invented a whole new genre and a whole new rhythm. Black, like Langston, Nikki, and Maya dropping literary cataclysms. Black, like that love, like them kitchen traditions. Black, like a Sunday afternoon church convention. Because if I have a choice, if I get to come back, please no, don't make me nothing other than black. I love y'all.
To come and speak for us and talk about who we are in the Native American piece.
Sorry, I'm short. Okay. So, part of the questions and the reason why I was driving those questions is because there does need to be a dialogue between all the communities, the impacts we've had on each other. One of the most significant impacts we've had is the integration of two cultures. And it's a beautiful thing when we can open those hearts to allow love and families that are blended to actually operate. So I was asked to speak about, the Afro-Indigenous experience. Let me clarify, I am not Afro-Indigenous. I cannot speak to that experience. What I can speak to is the impact, the continuing issues we still have in our community today, and what it is on the Indigenous side of that experience. This is in no way a means to take away from anybody else's voice or experience if these are simply observations. But the Afro-Indigenous experience is a very unique one. So there has been a long embattled history in the United States, including how the government works and the colonizational impacts. And there has to be a way to view how, for example, Buffalo soldiers were used to further impact colonization and drive apart and destroy families. So we can call it a victory because in their perspective it was a victory. For us, for Indigenous people, it was a further desecration of the land and the bonds that had been formed. Because now those that have been taken in as family, we're seeing similar trends on the outside of that coming in to further destroy and claim the land. Another example would be what happened with Bruce's Beach. How many of you are aware of that one? So with what happened there, none of that was correct. None of it. The family should have never had their land taken. We fully accept that. However, the government did it anyways. So are we still free? We're not free. When we talk about reparations, everybody thinks, oh, it's just giving money. But it's not. This is about balancing a balance sheet by both bodies, families, and income from what they've derived from this land. And what I am seeing is a lot of dialogue about how they're even trying to continue to erase the Indigenous side of that experience. We have to work together because at the end of the day, we're all here. Nobody's trying to kick anybody out. The land back movement is not trying to evict people or souls or any claims. That beach should have never left the Bruce family's hands. There's other lands that were also declared by eminent domain and taken away that will not be restored. How do we reconcile that? So we need to really look at where we're fighting against each other. And that's all it's coming down to. We need to create a united front, support our brothers and sisters in all forms. Stop fighting and following the colonial impact and patterns that are destroying families. Because I'm watching it. I'm watching it happen to our elders. I'm watching it happen to our children who have no idea what their actual heritage is. And we need to fix that. But that means all of us, all of you in all of these seats, you're here for a reason. What is it you wanted to learn? What is it you were hoping that would come out of something like this? Where are we taking responsibility in the community to teach the next ones? Because at some point, our expiration date comes up. Who's going to take that knowledge and pass it down? It's scary because that colonial mindset is so strong. And I am upset not because of the fact that we fought each other, but the fact that it still seemed as okay. So that goes back to my question. Where can we create these dialogues to show that we need to support each other in all aspects? Because everybody deserves a home here. Everybody. Nobody's denying that. But nobody wants to give it to the other either. So talking about reparations, and I'm going to use this to lead into the brilliant Dr. Kirby here, because I love what she has to say. Reparations, there's a lot of conversations out in politics right now about reparations. What does it mean? What is it we want? Is it really money? How many of you understand eugenics and the fact that the government sanctioned all the way up until the 90s having women's uteruses ripped out by force? Anybody? Do we know about that? How many of you have actual experience with that? Family members? Scary. The state of California actually started issuing reparations for women who were forced to go through that. The problem is they're not finding the survivors or families because these women were often left with no children to pass it down to. So all this money they have set aside for reparations right now for these women, they're not passing out. They've only made 20 paychecks for that. And they have documentations for over 100,000 women. Do we want to talk about reparations? Let's talk about the fact they waited 80 years too late for that. Where are these families now? Talk about land reparations. How many of you know how large the state of California is? Any idea? It's huge, right? Do you know what the price of the land was back in the 1840s, before General Vallejo signed it over to officially become the state of California? 49 cents an acre. Do you know what the value of that acreage is now? Over $5,000. So let's talk about reparations. What would that total be for every square acre in the state of California if they were to pay at market value? Any math people in here? Anybody? About $89 quadrillion. So let's talk about reparations. Are we asking for that money? Anybody know that answer? No? We should though. So, at the end of the day, it's not about the money. It's the fact that we were confined to reservations, not allowed to support our families as we had traditionally here. We were not allowed to take care of the land, which we're seeing the results of that now, even in this generation. We were not allowed to monitor our own water as we had for generations before. We were not allowed to do anything but live exactly how they wanted us to, in tiny little boxes, with food that wasn't even good for us, that they decided. That takes away so much autonomy and the ability to continue to thrive the way our bodies were designed for here. So when you tie that in with the Afro-Indigenous experience here, you had two sets of people who were now required to follow a government that gave no cares for them. And slavery did exist. Slavery existed in California long before it became California. Anybody know that? Okay. So what were the laws and the rules on that? There was the Spanish missionaries were one, and there's a brilliant book on that called Cross of Thorns. I recommend anybody go find that and read that. So that established it. But when the state of California became the state of California, there were actually slavery laws on the books then too. The slave market was massive. It was up and down the entire state. There's actually cases about it out of Napa and out of Sonoma County. So this stuff was local, very local. So for those who think that slavery did not happen in California, it happened. And it's still impacting families today. So for reparations for that, I think that should be accounted for. Because that is lost income, that is lost identity, that is a lot of lost things. And who has to account for that? Is that us or is that the state? a rough visual, trying to think about what that should look like. But at the end of the day, we need to take care of each other.
So you keep mentioning they, and I'm going to make a presumption.
To you, happy birthday, Ascari. Happy birthday to you. Can I say that one more time? Happy birthday to you. Well, I gotta finish with you. You good-looking, fine-framed, intelligent, wonderful woman. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear sweet Ascari. Happy birthday to you. And happy birthday to all the other people who celebrate her birthday. She gets that special one, does her? By me, come on, pretty baby. Bye. Yeah, I need your love, it's mama. Stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Yeah, by me. I can't make it without your love, you see. Stand by me.